I'm here today with my colleague and friend Tama Huang, CohnReznick Chief Innovation Officer. Tama and I will take a look at how our buildings have evolved over the years, the different factors that drove and shaped it, and the business, human, and community needs at each stage. From this, we hope we can glean some of the likely characteristics of the next normal of real estate businesses in the days ahead. Hello, Tama. Thank you for spending time with me today.
Hello, Charmaine. 你好, and 新年快乐.
你好，新年快乐. So, Tama, talk to me about the evolution that we're going to explore today.
Over the past few decades, we've truly seen a progression of moving from, say, automated and green buildings to safe buildings, to smart buildings, to healthy buildings. And ultimately, we believe we're going to end up with something, akin to trusted buildings.
Great. Well, let's dig in a little bit deeper by looking back in the late 90s, where automation came into play much more prevalently in the industry.
Well, definitely I had less white hair in the 90s. But building automation as we know it really started in the late 90s with the widespread adoption of DDC, or direct digital control devices, which enabled integration of building automation and our IT systems. After BREEAM in the 90s came LEED, the 1.0 standard of design and construction for the green buildings in the early 2000s. I think it was 2003. And these developments reflect the political and social zeitgeist of the era. The U.S. Energy Policy Act, 2005, heightened the need for environmentally sustainable office building, while the Kyoto Protocol then focused on fighting global warming and climate change. For the building, this meant improved energy efficiency and sustainability of facilities. For those of us occupying the buildings came great features of convenience, such as network-connected printers, for example, and centrally controlled lighting and ventilation. Advancing sustainability through environmentally safe and energy-efficient buildings also drove great benefits into our communities.
Yes, I agree. I mean, green building standards are definitely a positive way to measure and encourage more sustainable construction and energy efficiency in the operation of buildings. I think besides the international standards like LEED, many of the Asian countries have also developed domestic standards. And we see a lot of traction, among local and owners and investors towards these local standards. For example, in Singapore, the Building and Construction Authority launched the BCA Green Mark in 2005. And by 2017, the percentage of S-REITs that have at least one property in their portfolio that is Green Mark certified has risen to over 80% just in the course of about 12 years. As we move ahead, I think, in the late 90s and 2000s, that was definitely a time of building safety. I still remember the Northridge earthquake in Southern California, and then the Kobe earthquake in Japan, and then, of course, 9/11. What changes did these events trigger, Tama?
Yeah, we go from green buildings to safe buildings. After the 9/11 terrorist attacks in New York City in 2001, there was that really heightened the need for greater safety in building design and construction. Engineers at the time studied the collapse of the World Trade Center to understand how buildings fail. And based on those findings, they developed intelligent concrete that could withstand compression pressure 4 times that of traditional concrete. Safe buildings to developers, investors, and landlords means stronger, more durable buildings that can withstand both natural and man-made catastrophes. And every single one of us who's entered a high-rise building or flown on an airplane since, we have felt the effects of this. We have accepted the security measures that followed 9/11 as the new normal. And as individuals, we are only as safe as the communities we live in. Improved emergency response and communications capabilities help unite communities, increase preparedness, and mitigate loss in the event of a catastrophe. be it from a terrorist attack, typhoon, or earthquake.
Yeah, mitigating the loss of life is definitely, the highest priority. But I think also from, investors' point of view, we have to mitigate the loss of value as well. In earthquake-prone countries like Japan, for example, the engineering has evolved from seismic resistance, building that sway to defray, the impact of underlying earth movement, to seismic isolation. Visually, it looks a bit like the building is resting on these huge shock absorbers. So in particular, this seismic isolation technology has pretty much become the de facto standard for mission critical properties like data centers in Japan since the late 2000s.
Charmaine, I recently actually was back visiting my parents in Taiwan, and we went up to the top of Taipei Ilinyi. And I don't know if you've seen it, but there's this giant damper up there. It's yellow, and it's this giant steel damper, but it really alleviates the sway of the building. And that type of engineering is just tremendous. And we're seeing more and more of those types of innovation in the built environment.
That's wonderful. I need to go check it out, next time I go to, Taipei 101. Thinking, past kind of just safe buildings to, now the talk about smart buildings. We hear a lot about smart buildings and the Internet of Things, but sometimes it seems like we cannot really see this IoT at work, visually. Is IoT actually more prevalent and tangible than people think?
Honestly, I don't think it's just IoT. It's the Internet of Everything, or IoE. And we talk a lot about smart buildings, but for the most part today, we're just at the very beginning of that. We have connected buildings today, buildings that engage in a monologue, sensors sending data at us, rather than a dialogue where we take that data and are able to do something with it. Today, we connect disparate building assets to understand energy consumption, better manage facilities and equipment, and automate occupier services. Tomorrow, I hope, we will be able to monitor how building occupants use the space, their preferences, and also their behaviors inside of the building. So smart building owners will move from space occupancy to space utilization to space experience with improved productivity, greater sustainability, and enhanced reputations, all leading to stickier tenants. And those tenants, in turn, will benefit from a more curated experience and greater comfort. So smarter buildings make for happier people and stronger communities. But I would still say that, real estate is going to be, all of us will probably take a dumb building in a good location over a smart building in a not so good location.
But I think buildings will always be about location, in every single market. But I think smart building in a good location it will be the ideal.
Yes, absolutely.
What we also see is, along with these smart buildings, we also see the tenants, or the operators, coming up with kind of smart business models and smarter use of space to suit the local needs in whatever community they're in. For example, even in a relatively mundane self-storage industry, for example, we see that differentiation. For example, in the U.S., typically self-storage or mini storage are these exterior single-story buildings where you drive your car up to and you load your golf clubs in it. In Asian cities like Hong Kong or Taipei, people don't necessarily all have cars, and buildings obviously all rise vertically due to limited land. So as a result, we also see the self-storage business model pivot to provide a pickup and delivery service where the customers can actually request their boxes or goods to be brought to them. They unpack, get some stuff, and then send it back to the storage facility just via a phone app. So a smart building, can enable the customers perhaps even to track and see their boxes, back at the storage facility as well.
Yeah, I think you're right, Charmaine. It's not just about the smart building itself, but a smart experience or a digital experience that is smart enabled. Speaking of car ownership in Asian cities, I was just amazed to see smart car parks, right? You pull your car up and you exit, and then the garage takes your car, and who knows what floor it goes to, and when you're done you swipe your card and your car comes back out. I mean, those are all going to be the type of experiences that we're going to be expecting from the smart built environment as we go forward.
Absolutely. We're now in 2021, but obviously 2020 was just, in a way, an unforgettable year. So
I'm trying to forget it, Charmaine. I'm absolutely trying to forget 2020.
What do you think, Tama, has COVID taught us or revealed about the strengths or weaknesses of our built environment?
Today, we're not in buildings. Charmaine, you and I are not in our offices. We are in our homes, and we're not in buildings not because they're not structurally sound or secure or sustainable. We're not in buildings due to a global health pandemic. And as we live through a second wave, third wave, I think you're living through a fourth wave of COVID-19 right now, and our eyes are fixed on the rollout of the various vaccines around the globe, there will be an eventual return to the built environment. And in the same way 9/11 changed safety and security measures, COVID-19 will change janitorial services. We expect when we enter into a high rise today that there will be security desks. We don't just walk in. And we will be expecting touchless controls for doors and lights and lifts. For landlords and owners and operators, monitoring and safeguarding occupants from physical harm and disease will be as important as enhancing business continuity plans, establishing work from anywhere programs, and implementing technologies and processes for cleaning and worker safety. Because without that, workers cannot and will not return to the office. And it's going to be interesting to see how this affects our communities, because certainly private and public spheres have been and will continue to intersect and overlap. My home is my office is my home now.
Yeah, indeed. I think many of these amenities, so-called like touchless controls or long-lasting disinfectant services, those used to be, innovative, or nice to have, will pretty much, become or has become the standard, and even possibly some back of house, protocols as well. For example, in the last couple of weeks, here in Hong Kong, the university has started a pilot program to test the main sewer water for COVID virus in several high-rise residential blocks. And through that, and then through mandatory testing, we were actually able to find several asymptomatic cases amongst residents in these apartment buildings. So I can imagine these kinds of tests, these kind of back of house procedures also becoming routine as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think, not just high rises and apartment buildings, but, university campuses, for example, as well.
Yes, actually, I read that they were also doing that sort of testing for the dorms back at, my alma mater, in Berkeley as well. So where do we go from here, Tama? What do you think landlords, architects, engineers, and software startups have in mind for the days ahead?
We are in a rebuilding stage right now. We need to rebuild daily routines, rebuild what work looks like, for our kids, rebuild what school looks like. And it's not a Microsoft Teams or Zoom screen, right? So that rebuilding is going to entail us getting back to interacting with one another, and back into buildings and back to work. So, and to get to that, we must rebuild trust. Trust that the building is safe and healthy. Trust that the air is filtered. Trust that the surfaces are disinfected. But more than anything, trust with each other. We need to know that our co-tenants and our co-occupants and our co-workers can be trusted. So I believe that the singular and most important thing for us to be focused on as we go forward is rebuilding that trust.
I absolutely agree. Ultimately, real estate is not about the concrete or the steel columns or even, touchless controls to call the elevators, but it's really about the people. It's about how you and I interact with the space and with each other. And it is an underlying trust that gives meaning to these interactions. Oh, Tama, thank you very much for your insight as always, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Charmaine. It was great to catch up with you.